So hi everybody, if you don't know me, I am Agile Renee. I have a blog, it's at agileforest.com, where I complain a lot about management and HR. I also have a podcast which I do with a couple of friends of mine, Craig and Tony, and we also just bitch about everything else, Agile. So we regularly do a podcast about once every couple of weeks. Been going for a couple of years now. A lot of fun, have a listen. So is everyone in the right spot? The spot where reality is broken? Any geeks in the room? Good, you'll be right at home. I want to open this. There's a couple of politically incorrect slides, so if you don't like political incorrectness, feel free. Just a couple. Clear the room. Did anyone bring any games?
Angry Birds?
You've found Angry Birds. Angry Birds doesn't count. So when Craig said, "Oh, Renee, can you do a session?" I go, "Sure." And he didn't actually tell me how many people, so I catered enough games for 100 people. It's not quite that, so we're set. So let's start. Anyone here a gamer? Ooh, segment over there. Do people wish they were a gamer after seeing this image? Okay. Would you put up your hand now? Yeah. So, when people talk about gamers, there's this stigma that they're like a white, pasty teenager, or they're this middle-aged bloke living in his parents' home.
Basement.
Thank you. But the reality is, we are actually all gamers. We just don't know it. So part of today's session is to give you that realisation that we are all gamers ourselves. So I want to tell you a story about me. Anyone recognise this?
I don't think
that's going to This is an Atari 2600.
Awesome.
I had one of these when I was 6 years old, so you can work out the maths from there.
That was my tech server competition.
That was, yeah. I played Pac-Man and Tarzan and Space Invaders and those really cool things. That was fun. I think the reason why I played so much games is that my parents didn't want to play with me. So, then in a couple of years I got this. What's this?
It's an Apple.
Yeah, it's a Commodore 64. You know, the drive that drives. Does anyone recognise this?
This is Larry.
This is Sweet Larry in the Land of the Lounge Lizards. So this was a game which, for its time was awfully politically incorrect. And I was playing it at 10. Probably not a good idea. I don't know if my parents knew that. But a lot of people think, when they think about gamers, as people that do video games. Well, it's not just video games. So, I played a lot of games up until probably about 12 years old. Then the inevitable high school thing kicked in. Sort of buckled down sort of thing. Made sure that I did all my study, went through the university, and only pretty much at the end of the university did I go back into video games. For about 6 years now, I've been doing the whole massive multiplayer online role-playing games where I'm this nice little sorcerer and I inject magic to people and play with hundreds of other people. These games have millions of people. And they're out there, and a lot of people just don't know what they're like and what they can give back to us as a human race. But there's also role-playing games. You ever play with Lego? You're role-playing. This was a kit that I had back in the 80s. I actually had to search for it and go, that's the one I had. You can tell I'm having a number of male presents, right? Because I had a brother that's 3 years older than me. So I never really got much myself, other than a few things. So I had a Cabbage Patch Kid. Now, Cabbage Patch Kid is a role-playing game. It's also very interesting. It's a influence and status motivator. So if you think about it, does anyone remember the anthem or the theme? Do I really ever sing it?
No.
Yes. I'm a one of a kind of Cabbage Patch Kid. There's nobody like me. Ooh, really? No one remembers that?
That's fine.
So Cabbage Patch Kids, I remember really, really strongly spending an hour at the toy store looking for the Cabbage Patch Kid that had number 1 in the back of the head to signify it was a one of a kind, because I didn't want another toy that someone else had. So, when I grew up, Star Wars was a big thing. My brother had a lot of these things. You're role-playing when you play with Star Wars characters. You would have all had these sorts of toys. And yeah, I had a Barbie. Okay, move on. Board games. We all play with them. We were gamers. Think about board games. What are they doing? We're role-playing. I'm being a banker. I'm being a real estate agent. I'm being an investor. I'm being a doctor. I'm being a detective. We're trying to mimic real life through games. Is sports a game? So, other than the fact that I did lots of games, my parents also encouraged some physical activity. Obviously new ones in adulthood. But from around about 6 to 16, I played netball. From around about 14 to 16, I played volleyball. You all would have done physical sports. They were games. I actually had this game too, Game of Life, if anyone remembers it. Not the Simpsons version though. Is life a game? A lot of people talk about, got to play the game. Is work a game? Yeah, this is really crappy games. So a lot of people would have heard of the term gaming the system. What does that mean?
Working, understanding.
It's understanding the system, outsmarting it, working it. Who of you has worked in an organisation that's fairly large that has a cumbersome PMO? Did you game it? Yeah. All right. So, when I build systems as an Agile coach, I will build the system with the knowledge that a good majority of people will game it. The reason being is that they'll look for these loopholes that makes their life easier. So when I work in teams that try and do PMOs, for example, I will build a PMO that can be gamed. And what I mean by that is, as an example, I will have a framework for how you approve a $10 million project, a 1-year project. I will have a framework for how you get 2 weeks worth of work or a 1 month worth of work approved. I'll make the 1 month work really easy to get approved and make the $10 million project really hard to get approved. Now, I don't do that because of the whole governance element. I do it because of risk. If by having 1 month of work is easier, people will try and break their work down to fit into that slot. Now, what happens when we break work down?
More about success.
Yeah, we're more going to succeed. We're reducing the risk. We're actually breaking the problem down. Hopefully, we're still breaking the benefits down as well. But you need to consider, as coaches in the community or as people who are practicing, just how people could be gaming your system and trying to rebuild your system around that. What about Agile? Is Agile a game? So what about Agile's game?
People are still trying to work better ways around it, dealing with it.
Yep, as a system.
As a system.
Mm-hmm. What else?
Corburn's book on it, Agile Software Development, he says it's a collaborative game discovery.
Yeah, so Alistair
I've
Coburn
seen
calls it a collaborative game.
before.
Who also referred to it as a game? Jeff Sutherland likened it to chess. He's see it in the Scrum Guide, currently up on their website. So, I just want to at least make you understand that games aren't just video games. Anyone have to recognise this person, by the way? Yeah, Lana Del Rey. She made a song about video games. Went viral on the internet. Is now, probably a multi-millionaire, but she was anyway because of her dad. But anyway, I want to be able to walk through these different aspects and talk to you about gaming theory and how they may apply. So you'll actually see just how much life, work, and Agile is or is not a game. So rule number 1. There needs to be clear and defined goals or outcomes that have to be achieved. How does that work for a board game? Can someone tell me about a board game that does that?
Monopoly.
Monopoly, how does it do it?
Your outcomes to be achieved around buying property.
Yep.
And not landing in jail.
So your goal is to win by overtaking the most property, right?
Most property, most money.
What about sports? Can someone give me a sports example?
Score more goals.
More goals. Yep. Have the lowest number of golf of balls in a hole. Life.
That's a hard one.
Have a big house.
Yeah, this is a really weird cultural social one, isn't it? There's that whole succeed in life sort of thing. But to some people, succeeding in life, some people, our common goal is money. To other people, it's family. Harder. Work. What are your goals and objectives at work?
Getting paid.
Getting paid. Yeah. Having fun?
Working with the
I think
PMO.
the getting paid one's really interesting. Yeah.
I said working with the PMO.
Okay. What about Agile? What clear and defined goals and outcomes have to be achieved in Agile?
Delivery.
Yes, working software. Okay, so think about it in a term of, let's say, Scrum, where you have to pull in a certain number of points, usually we call it velocity, and there's a certain expectation of commitment to achieve that velocity. Yeah? That's your goal. Achieve your velocity or achieve your commitment for that iteration, right? Yes or no?
Yeah.
Okay. No? Sorry, was there a no there?
Yeah, I disagree with that.
Go.
I think that's a very full definition of Scrum. It's an expectation, not a commitment.
Okay, I'm not going to get into the whole Scrum commitment debate because, really that's debating that for fun. Just as an example. What about Kanban?
Full story.
Shorten your lead time.
Okay, those are both interesting. They're
What was the
actually
one from that
not
side?
quite right.
What was the one from that side?
Limit whip.
Shortening lead
Shortening
time
lead
to get
times.
the business value out.
Yeah, I think shortening lead times is probably, understanding your cycle time,
Yep.
then managing your flow.
Yep.
Clear understanding, explicit policies. They've actually got 5 or 6 of them. It's pretty easy to read. Constraints. Constraints and the next one are the two most important things. And I think if we focus on these as Agile practitioners, we're getting a lot further in our delivery. Understanding constraints and what is limiting us, which is effectively what Kanban's doing when it's saying defining explicit policies, and using them to our advantage versus to our disadvantage. Do you think about the constraints that you have today? Most of them you consider to be your disadvantage. We want to have constraints that are to our advantage. So what constraints do we have in board games?
The rules.
The rules, yeah. So in Monopoly,
The cards, charts.
you get cards, right? You got dice, right? Move the number of dice points that you have. What about sports?
Rules.
Sorry?
Rules.
Yeah.
Yeah, so what sort of rules do we have in sports? Give me an example.
Only elbow someone in the umpire.
Yes, so not hurting people. Yeah, you've got quadrants that certain people can be in, for example, when you play netball. You've got certain things that you can do, movements that you can make, right? What about life? What constraints do we have in life?
Don't jump in front of buses. Yes.
Regulation, sorry, what was that? What was back there?
With me? I like his better.
I said laws come.
Yeah.
Laws, yeah, laws is a constraint that we have.
Social norms.
Social norms and social laws, yes. Yep. What else? You've got constraints in your work, right? In your work life as well. What constraints do you have in your job?
Policies.
Policies, standards, yep.
PMO.
PMO. There's such love in the room for PMOs. What about Agile?
Velocity.
Velocity, yeah. So your constraint is your time box in Scrum, right? We don't want to do work outside of that time box. So if someone comes in 2 or 3 days into the iteration and says, please do this, we go, no thank you, goodbye. We should. Probably most people don't. But that's the whole benefit of the time box, was to say no. It's a deliberately imposed constraint that's outside the norm. What about Kanban? Policies? WIP is the big one. Yeah. Limiting work in progress. Again, a deliberate constraint imposed outside the norm. For a value, for a beneficial value. Right. Real-time feedback. For me, Agile is all about real-time feedback. Feedback is one of the most powerful things that you can do. Making it as fast and as rapid as possible is the greatest benefit that you can have. So how do we get feedback in board games? Yeah, you land on something, something happens, right? So there's like a cause and effect that happens in board games. What about sports?
You lose.
Well, yeah, and sports is immediate feedback in almost all instances. What about life?
Experience. Life. You die.
Make it safe.
Well, life experience is a bit harder. I'll give you that. What about work?
Work should be even harder.
I think actually work is the hardest one, and I think not for the right reasons. So if you think about HR departments, anyone from HR department here? Excellent.
Go for it.
Cut loose.
If you think about performance reviews, do you have once a year performance reviews?
No.
A once a year performance review is a terrible feedback cycle. It's just hideously bad. What other really bad HR things do we do that aren't fast enough?
Exit interviews.
Exit interviews, that's an interesting one. Did you actually know that you're more likely to get an honest answer if you ask a team member for the peer that left than actually asking the person that left because they don't want to burn their bridges? If we make our feedback loops tighter with work, if we give people in our teams feedback instantaneously, we are more likely to improve engagement. So HR policies and performance reviews of reward and recognition based upon years worth of work is not a tight feedback loop. What about Agile? What does Scrum do to have tight feedback loops? Retros. What else? Sorry, I didn't hear that. Demos, yeah, showcases, yep. Stand-ups. A little bit of the feedback in there. Yep. Kanban. Kaizen, yep. You can still do retros in Kanban as well. I think if we enable faster and faster, the faster your retrospective, which is why a lot of people are encouraging even less time frame, even daily scrums. we're encouraging our feedback loops, and we're making sure that people are more engaged. The really interesting last rule number 4, voluntary participation. So when we talk about people playing video games, they do it voluntarily.
Unless they're addicted.
Well, yeah, you do it voluntarily because you're addicted. Board games, voluntary. Sports, voluntary. Unless you're in China, mostly. Life. Do you participate in life voluntarily?
No, you don't. Life is not voluntary.
Well, would you like to pick the street?
Oh, what's the difference between existence and life? There's a whole question.
Television 24/7.
What about work? I want to go back to the pay packet concept. All too often, we're not engaged, we're not voluntary there for the work. We're voluntary there for the payback. So, if you don't enjoy your job, do something about it, please. Because it really is impacting your engagement. I would rather have passionate people that care about their work than people that care about their pay packets.
But the reality is your team's going to be full of people who are there for the payback.
How can you inspire them otherwise?
There's the challenge.
It is. And I think as an Agile community, we should be there to inspire passion. I try and do it every single day.
It's easily said.
But you've got to do it. You've got to live it. So when it comes to Agile, is it right to force Agile on someone if they don't want it?
I don't know if that's what the unit's doing. That's what the
Depends
process
why they
is.
don't want it.
Sorry?
Depends why they don't want it.
Yeah. Okay. So there's an attitude and aptitude thing that might be in there. They may not want to, or they may not have the understanding of what it is to be able to say yes or no. A lot of people sort of need to try something before they will accept it. Sorry?
Renee Japan.
Dr. Seuss.
There's some people in the Agile community that say that it should be voluntary. And I think a lot of Agile transformation started with it being voluntary. So if you have a look at transformation models, usually people start adopting Agile because the team inside wants to do something differently. But then what happens is, somewhere in the line, a manager goes, this is actually a smart thing to do, we should all do this. And then that team buy-in is gone. So again, as a community, we need to potentially do some work in reintroducing buy-in to this. I don't think it's fair at all to say you shall be doing Agile now without spending time with them around change and understanding change.
So different questions.
Sorry?
One, it's an answer to a different question. The question was, is it fair to force people to do Agile? The answer isn't get buy-in. The answer is you've got to have the one project or the one team or the one office using the one methodology. Because you can't.
Why?
For one deliverable. So let's just put it into a deliverable model. You can't have half your delivery team using waterfall and prints and half using. So let's say you've got a pipeline. So you've got your business, your BAs, your testers, and your developers delivering the one outcome. You can't have half of them doing waterfall and half of them doing Agile.
Okay, so
It's
that's team versus individual, right? Yeah.
So
that is an interesting quandary. If you have half the team that want to do it, half that don't, how do you encourage it? Is it voluntary? Well, it's voluntary for half the team, but for the other half, it's not going to be, is it?
yeah.
That's a problem. So how can we make them feel safer? Make them feel more comfortable, sorry.
Remove the fear and make it fun.
Yeah. So this team over here, this group here, you're actually really lucky because you're going to play that game. Okay. So I want to talk a little bit about some of the games that I've developed. I do a lot of training for a very large organisation, which I'm not discussing, But I do a lot of training of Scrum Masters, IMs, for example, and I do a lot of development of games for that training because I believe that games are a great way to learn. Because you're doing it, you're understanding the principles behind it, and you're actually living with those constraints that I talked about. So in each of these cases, I needed to make sure there was a clear outcome or a goal, there were built-in constraints, that there was real-time feedback, and that participation was voluntary. So just really, practice war, yep, start on that. So practice war is a game that we've actually got at the front here. It involves cards. I'll probably actually move you guys, so we might rotate through. A whole pile of cards. So over 9 years of Agile coaching, I've seen almost every single problem possible, and I've written them on a pack of cards. There's around about 100 problem cards here.
Is the answer on the other side?
No, there's another problem on the other side. Don't worry for that. Additionally, then you've got solution cards. So solution cards can be the Agile manifesto, it could be the Agile principles, it could be practices or the techniques that you apply to that particular problem. So this is a game that's based upon industrial logic. It's XP War. Anyone remember that at all? Joshua Karyevsky, around about 9 years ago, created the game. Okay, cards. Anyway, so adapted it over time to be more up to date with Agile as it's changed and shifted over the years. This is a really great game to play, and you can create your own packs. These are just the packs that I've got. You can actually see they're quite big. These are all the fixes and all the solutions here. These are all the problem cards through here. And what you do is with teams, you deal out a certain number of cards, of solution cards, and then you actually turn up a problem card. Say, what solutions will fix this? It's educating the team as a group, and you just play this regularly in order to reinforce practices and principles and values. And what I used to do, just for unsuspecting teams, was I used to stack the deck. I knew what problems they were having. I'd bring up the problem card. I actually have I can shuffle without taking the top card off, if that makes sense. So I did that, made it look as if it was legit. Oh, look at this problem. What should we do about it? And get the team to talk about how to resolve it. Yeah, I'm a bit of a horrible coach. So the design intent behind this was to understand Agile in all of its facets much more deeply. At a Harley, if we talk about Shu Hari, why do we do this technique? What values does it have for us? Why shouldn't we be doing this? This is a really good game. You can play it in many different ways. So I just described one way of how to play it, but there's many different variants about how you can play it. Project Snapper. Team at the back over there has got Project Snapper, I think.
Yes.
So, what does it feel like as a Scrum Master or Iteration Manager when the project is not set up for success? This is actually really quite a long project, a long game. We do this as an hour. There's a lot of things that we get out of this as a game. So this is about mimicking an Agile project from end to end, what it feels like, what sort of problems you hit. It's deliberately built for certain problems. So you can experience it yourself, and for others you can watch the fun because they'll be the last thing to finish. Right, Eurotrip 2012, you guys don't have this because I can't find my deck of cards. Oh, there it went. This is a game that was specifically built. In all of these cases, all of these games were designed for specific intent, for a specific audience. So when we talk about design intent, we have a number of project managers that are very familiar with what we call the iron triangle, time, cost, scope. They believe all elements are fixed. So this is a retraining exercise that we use for project managers to say, no, those elements aren't actually fixed. Some of them are shifting. And the way in which we do this is there's around about a pack of 50 cards, and we get them to plan a holiday trip to Europe. Now, different tables get different variants of what we call success sliders. So success sliders is, what's more important? Is it time, cost, quality, or scope? So they get this picture given to them that says, for example, scope is number 1, cost is number 2, quality is 3, and time is full. And they get to build their own trip with an understanding of how big it is as an activity, how much it costs. They have little aeroplane cards too, so they get to travel around the countryside. They get little tokens for accommodation, so they get to choose sort of the quality of the accommodation that they're at. So this is purely there just to retrain PMs about thinking differently. Car change game, which is this one here. I don't really want to give this one away. You can have a look at it on my blog site if you want to have a bit more detail associated with it. This is to get people comfortable with change. So I use achievements sometimes as a means to be able to get the team to want to change. Okay, so voluntary participation. So an achievement board is a means to be able to say, yes, we've done a certain practice exceptionally well, we deserve an achievement for that. You can create this just with your teams themselves, so let them establish what the achievement board is for you, or you can give it to them and you can work out which practices that you want to try and win. You can compete between teams, so there's a competitive element of this to encourage people to uplift capability. But as an example, Back to the Future. I've done 5 retrospectives in a row. I've made sure that everyone's there, and we've actioned out all of our action items out of them. Achievement done. Number 2, be 10, be 20. Right? From Russia with Love, if anyone's familiar with Moscow as a concept, it's a prioritisation mechanism, must have, should have, could have, would like to have. All of my cards are prioritised. Achievement. Okay? So it's an interesting mechanism to say that we've succeeded in something. And you can go through to that website, got a bit more details about it. I want to segue just a little bit and talk about software development and gaming. The last 10 years have been more focused on social connectivity. Twitter is an example, LinkedIn is an example, Facebook is an example. How we connect to each other. What is the next 10 years potentially going to be? I think it's about engagement. Engagement in our social networks, engagement in our communities, and how we can evolve that. So what are some game dynamics that you can have in software? Anyone play Farmville? Yeah, no one would admit to Farmville these days. It's a dynamic, an appointment dynamic, which makes people want to return every now and then. Has anyone got these games where on their iPhone, they come back every day because they get their points for something? It makes you come back to get those points. That's an appointment dynamic. Does anyone do Friday pub sessions with their team? It's an appointment dynamic, right? There's real life examples of this. It doesn't have to be a game. Influence and status. This is my clout page. Really available to you all right now. So some people believe in having influence and status upon others. It's important to them. There are some sites that are specifically targeted towards this. How can you use this as a dynamic in your teams potentially? How can you use this for software? Product status, and another example of influence, but it's a different take on it. Rather than it being a personal social thing, it's how our products as an organisation go. The higher the scoring that we have here, this is gadget.com, the higher we're recognised as in the community. This is another mechanism of saying, well, how highly are we recognised? There'll be more and more websites like this. Progression dynamics. Has anyone filled in their LinkedIn page to 100%? Why did you do that?
It just happened.
It happened because you saw this bar and you're going, oh my god, I'm going to get that to 100%. In fact, I did like 30% that one night. I'm going, why is this happening? So I haven't got it to 100 and it's sort of irking me still. There's a lot of games out there that are actual video games that focus on progression. XP, leveling is a concept that's coming from that. Oh, does anyone recognise this? It's going to be a hard one. So this is communal discovery. Alright, I reckon if I tell you, a couple of people will remember. This is the Golem project. It's the first ever crowdsourcing project that happened. This is prior to crowdsourcing actually being defined as a term. It was a screensaver that you used to load up onto your PC to, as a worldwide community, boost up the capacity to determine is there an evolutionary approach to how we evolve. So it was trying to model evolution at a crowdsourced layer.
It's like SETI.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like SETI, yeah. I think SETI came like a year afterwards. Something
Is
like
this
that.
before SETI?
Yeah. I had this on my screen and going, yes, I'm contributing to the world. This is world contribution. We as a community are doing a lot of that. Why do you think we're doing that?
Because it was a gate you think to do at the time.
Okay, that was it. Yeah, that was it. I had a moment of epiphany about a month ago when I realised that because we are so unengaged at work, the statistics are around about 70%, for example, of Americans, I know we're not in America, but 70% of Americans are unengaged in their jobs. Because we're so unengaged, we're not loyal to our organisations anymore. We don't feel like it's a job for life anymore. Does anyone feel like their company's a job for life? No. I look to my organisation. Do you hear anyone say that? No. We're not loyal. So we've actually gone out and created these communities of practice because we wanted to feel like we were belonging to something. This is how we're doing this. Agile is exactly this as a community. Because we're not feeling that we owe it to our organisations anymore. Has anyone heard of the Fold It? This happened a couple months ago, I think it was late last year. So this is an example of the community coming together and solving a real world problem through games. So Seth, I'm going to pronounce the name wrong, Bush, has a really good TED talk. It's a very short one, 5 minutes, covered a couple of these points, but not all of them. Well worth listening to. He gives a bit of different understanding about it. If you want to have a couple of ideas about books to read, Reality is Broken. Has anyone ever heard of Jugaad Innovation? Jugaad? Pronounce it wrong? Jugaad, thank you. Do you know what it is?
It's like a fix. It's not a real solution, but it's like a fix to a solution. It's like a not direct way of indirect way of doing some stuff.
Alright. So think of it back in terms of constraints. Jugaad innovation is about frugal innovation or financially constrained innovation. What are your constraints and how can you innovate inside of those constraints? Alright, so we have about 20 minutes at least to do a game. We get these two guys to switch tables. Pick a table, bear in mind. Now you have instructions in here, so you can play the game yourself. This is the easiest game. So when you're done, you might want to shift to this table here. Play for a while. For the kids. You've got instructions in here.
We need
Have a read of the instructions. Oh, you didn't get one because that way you can cheat. All right, who's okay? Who's going to be the Scrum Master
Now everyone knows.
I disagree. We only do one part at a time.
It should fill up 50% of the bench. needs to be identifiable.
So look at the
Colouring as neatly as you can. Admire everyone's work. Red with 55. How easy it was to do. You want to look at hard, try easy.
Alright, so do we
Hard,
have
if you had a
developers
duplicate,
organized?
if you have to do how hard to
Tester?
learn.
What else we got?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Windscreen.
So I think we do all that.
Windscreen, steering wheel, headlights, that needs to be identified.
I disagree.
Yeah, so this is
I'm sure you were there, right? I don't know, what do you do?
You're on the golf course.
I was there at the workshop, did you? Yeah? Excellent. Well, very important that we get at least snap a test. We can do that, right?
So we can
Yep.
Oh, okay. I've got to do
Well, my job is to get I'll be back in 10 minutes. So what's the difference? Is this the
Those two
Is this the story
there. So developers, if you make sure that you time your start.
Is each one of them like one?
Each one of them is pretty much like one. So
So does anyone know Karma here?
Alright.
Excellent.
So look at that. That's the
Yes, smile for check.
With that,
Okay.
It's gorgeous. You're all done and I'll that over for you. So you can scramble. You're ready to register it, right?
Probably going to have to come to it later. Probably can't do it, so I'll have to come and do everything.
well, let me go one way to
I just end up doing his work, that's what I he just can't do it like I can. He can't do it like I
I've
can.
already got 3 right now. You've got 2 doing, 1 is done.
One at a time.
So pick your Okay?
So we need
You should yes, I got
I wrote up that block.
So what does that Agile feel like there's something to do with that? What does Agile feel like?
I can do it for all.
Let's do that 9, and then we'll pick it.
Okay, let's do the red one.
We're talking about this is Agile.
Okay, I reckon everyone is a developer.
So I use
Okay, we all do it together and learn on each other.
again.
So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Think of us thinking it's going to okay? Everyone 5 and a half.
Yeah, well, I know.
I would have been much better at that than you.
You want second member, that's all you want. That's fine, we're going to give you
You know, it's just going to end up on my shoulders.
We're doing this together, or?
Alright, are you actually done your stand up?
Quick citations to who's making those statements.
None of you guys are doing anything. I was everything yesterday. The amount of work I've been watching, it's just insane. And you should say something before.
That's really, that's really At least you're giggling. That's a sign. You're lucky. You're the joker.
Oh, yes.
The superstar.
What's happening here? We're nothing currently
Doing anyway.
I'm very quality assurance.
In the end, it's got to be
I've done that bit.
the other thing I'm going to do.
Oh, you go like that.
Find out what
So how did you get that? So
maybe they can't get it.
so like that. So
And it's
let's get to the end of this one because I think most of you got the point, right?
Product owner can design his own snapback.
It feels like, why can't I do it the old way?
Yeah, fold that up.
The old way works fine. It's a minimal bit of change, right? You reckon that if you did this every single day, it's going to be better?
Make this person go.
We fold this up. One of the
But we try it, and after a little while, we get used to it. It's fun.
Like that. That's it. Like that.
Agile is change.
So you come in, yeah. You come in from the side.
Big of a deal.
Like this. Then you just bring this together.
Have you guys?
That's it.
Those guys over there.
Situations where it doesn't work, it's
What's the time? Scrum Master, I'll show you that.
You can put it
That's what's over there. I'll make it up.
So swap with these guys here. Guys, pick up your pieces of paper with you.
You're better. There you go.
That's my game. It's a bit hard.
Yeah, because you didn't have real content.
Okay, I'll have to use another one. I need to do two more. Why did you pick a unicorn? That was hard, wasn't it? Besides that,
Renee, you going well?
No.
You guys going well? We're
I'll tell you
ready
right now, we won't get to it. You won't get to it.
I know the community says, we got it out.
it's hard materials, it's something strikes.
Instructions.
And what was number 2?
Actually, it's just all in
That's so accurate. What's the exactly right? It's a unicorn one. Yes.
Is this what you wanted?
Are
you saying that too?
It's like the standard. It goes correct.
Can you draw lots of pictures out?
Okay, here's another step up. That's good one. Yeah, once you do it once. Change the requirements. It's that feedback.
I'm going to cut your iteration short for the purpose of this example. Showcase to me, please.
Oh, what? It's time box.
Your cards are blank, right?
Yeah, okay. And she's meant to be green too. And she's got dark brown hair. So you guys were there, right?
We were there.
You was knowing, but you get a
Oh, Chris, you weren't there?
I wasn't there, sorry. I was at the
Do you mean that no one
Agile
told you
show
what
conference.
happened?
Doing some research. Research and
Well, tell them what happened when you were planning us.
Who's that? Who are you again?
I was there, I'm the CEO of the company. I was there. Were you guys there? No, you were there. None of you are there.
We talk together too.
Hello, this is the white snapper.
Oh, we're doing it.
Yeah, we got one snapper.
White snappers.
Great, that's what I asked you not to make.
Totally behaving, you know, just in my normal.
And if you want to mention Wikipedia.com, if you look it up, that would be great. That's it.
What's my one? I want to stand up with orange stars. Is that orange? I'll give you the red purple stars and some orange.
You know when you get paid. Nothing.
Alright,
I wasn't doing it. It's me, you know.
Even though.
Alright, now, 2 more minutes.
I was the best before. Doesn't get around doing work to talk about.
Why is this doing my white snapper, not taking signal?
Do we actually have
Alright, so whilst you're drawing, I want to note a couple of things. Your screen shouldn't even have been thrown at the other hand. Do you think you can do that when you say you're going to go So you're giving it a try, great thing. Having fun, great thing. Is your core worse?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, shit, yeah.
Okay, it's taking longer. Right, these are the things that we can miss and they're it is longer, it is harder,
No.
Is there value in it if you did it for a couple months?
Yes.
Yes, you can be right. Alright, we call time, everybody!
business value in this story?
Get stop the game! Stop the game! So, I know, come on, humble people, you're always doing this to me! Stop it!
Oh,
Guys, stop! Alright, take a seat! Alright, you guys aware of Fist of Five's concept? 5 is really good, 1 is really bad. 5, did you have fun?
Yes.
Did you learn anything?
No.
Are you all gamers now? Can you use these exercises yourselves?
Yes.
Okay. Sorry.
Are they downloadable?
Are they downloadable? Some of them. You know, I'm more than happy to talk to me afterwards if you want to have more detail on some of them. So, gaming, we can learn a lot from. We can teach people, we can enhance our systems, and we can improve our engagement. Was this talk worthwhile to you?
Yes. Massively.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
I think that's
We
fine.
needed more time.
question. It took us a long time.
I would take the driving with us.
Then you are. You can take that over with you.